Biggest building project on the planet. Crossing windswept, waterless deserts, knife-edged mountain ridges, and deep river valleys to the edge of the sea and beyond. The Great Wall of China. It has 1,000 fortified passes and 10,000 watchtowers stretching across the breadth of Asia. This military marvel has protected the Chinese people for over 2,000 years and has stood through the rise and fall of empires. Its construction was an epic achievement, achieved through epic suffering. Hundreds of thousands died building the wall, its towers rising on the broken backs of peasants and slaves. It's one of mankind's greatest monuments. But is it the legacy of genius or a testament to tragedy? Beijing, 2005. Over China, satellites have compiled the first complete picture of one of the greatest ancient wonders of the world. The Great Wall of China is actually a series of walls built by different dynasties over 16 centuries. It was the most ambitious construction project in history. No monument on Earth has so captured the imagination or spawned so many myths. Some of the statistics surrounding the Great Wall seem more like hyperbole than fact. For example, that the Great Wall contains enough material to encircle the Earth. But the wall is usually estimated to be anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 kilometers in length, about the distance from Miami to the North Pole. So how could the wall truly circle the planet?
We have to remember that the Chinese built many Great Walls. And in total, if we look at them together, they would extend for a distance of more than 50,000 kilometers. That's 35,000 miles.
At the equator, the circumference of the Earth is about 40,000 kilometers, so it's not a myth. With all the Great Walls combined, there'd be material to spare. It's also been said that the Great Wall can be seen with the naked eye from the surface of the Moon. But at that distance from the Earth, no man-made details are visible. Even in low Earth orbit, astronauts have had difficulty spotting the wall.
China put its first man in space in 2003, and he was asked the inevitable question. And I expected him to say with great national pride, yes, I could see our Great Wall crossing our motherland. But surprisingly, he said no. But interestingly, an American astronaut, an astronaut on Apollo 17, joined the discussion, and he said, on my return to Earth, I looked out of my capsule and I could see the Great Wall of China. And he added, you only have to have good eyesight and know where to look.
Among the Earthbound, geographer William Lindsay has seen more of the Great Wall than almost anyone. He's followed it from one side of China to the other. For him, calling the wall great doesn't begin to do it justice.
The Great Wall, I believe, is the world's most famous building. People dream about coming to China and walking on it for just 30 minutes or an hour. And those with imagination realize this wall continues to the west for 2,000 kilometers, to the east for 3,000 kilometers. As the crow flies, in terms of the twisting route, we don't really know. And for me, that's the great thing about the Great Wall of China. It's the most famous building in the world, and it's the least known.
But what is known is incredible. A story that began over 2,000 years ago, when one man single-handedly created the Chinese nation.
Qin Shi Huangdi was known as the first emperor of China. He came to the throne at a time when the warring states had been struggling with each other for 250 years. And finally, he beat off his last rivals and he established the first state of China. That's why it's called China, after his name, Qin.
But if China was to survive, Qin Shi Huangdi would have to deal with another formidable challenge. The warrior horsemen who plundered at will along the northern frontier. An enemy who could attack anywhere, then melt away into the deserts and mountains.
The raiders came and they took not only goods, but they also took populace for slaves, and they destroyed and slaughtered.
China's first emperor came up with a solution that was stunningly simple and amazingly bold. He'd stop the horsemen in their tracks by building a gigantic wall. His strategic decision would create one of the wonders of the world. But rather than ensuring their safety, the construction of the wall would bring misery to his people. The fledgling Chinese empire was under siege, constantly attacked by raiders on its northern borders. So China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi, decided to stop them by building a giant wall. He handed this seemingly impossible task to a man as ruthless as himself, General Meng Jian. The challenge was mind-boggling: fortify the entire northern frontier at breakneck speed. The construction method would have to be simple and cheap. Fortunately, the Chinese had already perfected an effective wall-building technology. Over 2,000 years later, farmers still use the exact same technique, compacting earth into a frame until it's as hard as rock. But as time-lapse video shows, this is back-breaking labor and painfully slow. Even with an entire village working together, in 45 minutes, the wall rises only 5 centimeters. For Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, there was just one solution. Only an immense labor force, larger than the world had ever known, could build a wall across the whole of China. But manpower wasn't a problem for such a powerful and pitiless ruler. His soldiers rounded up hundreds of thousands of peasants, marched them north, and worked them till they dropped. The Chinese still remember their suffering, immortalized in the ancient legend of Meng Jianu. The emperor's soldiers ripped her beloved husband from her arms and dragged him away to labor on the wall. Cold and hungry, she searched for him across the vast expanse of China. At last, she arrived at the Great Wall. She'd found her husband, but she was too late. He was already dead from exhaustion. The legend says that in her grief, Meng let out a terrible cry. A shriek so powerful, it destroyed kilometers of the wall. Meng too met a tragic end. Protesting at the emperor's cruelty, she threw herself into the sea and drowned. After more than 2,000 years, the anguish of this young woman and thousands like her still haunts the soul of China. Near the start of the Great Wall, a seaside temple pays homage to her memory and symbolizes the appalling human cost of history's most ambitious construction project. As many as 1 million workers may have died over the long construction of the Great Wall. For centuries, the Chinese have believed it contains the bones of thousands of dead workers. But not all of the experts agree.
I think it's a myth The ancient Chinese had many ways of getting rid of unwanted bodies, slaves. They used to chuck them into wells, and they used to bury them headless in cemeteries adjacent to where they were building. But the wall here has such tight construction, and it is so compacted that I think a body in it would probably be more of a nuisance than anything else.
In Gansu, the Great Wall crosses some very remote places. So far, we found bits of pottery and animal bones buried inside. We haven't found any human bones yet, but I'm sure we'll find them one day.
Now experts will try something never attempted before. They'll put the legend to the test. They'll use Earth-penetrating technology to search for human remains in a section of the Qin Emperor's wall. Their magnetometer peers inside the ancient compacted Earth, measuring its density. A computer converts these measurements into an X-ray-like image of the wall. Different densities show up as different colors, so it's fairly easy to locate solid objects. But there's a problem. The compacted Earth is almost as dense as bone.
So if there were a body in the wall here, how would you recognize it?
As far as I know, there's still no reliable method to detect just bones. But if there's a pile of bodies, we'll be able to see them. There will be a big difference in the magnetic signature. But one individual body would be very hard to spot.
In this location, the magnetometer didn't show human remains. But it's too early to bury this compelling legend. With thousands of kilometers of wall still to be explored, the mystery remains. The first emperor's mighty wall brought appalling hardship to his people, and it failed to protect them from their enemies.
The greatest challenge to defending the walls was always finding motivated, sufficient manpower. Generally, people in the local area were impressed. There was also a wide variety of convicts, mercenaries, and other barbarians who were recruited for the task, but the walls were often understaffed and ill-provisioned, and therefore morale was low, many deserted, and this left tremendous gaps.
Nomad raiders rode through those gaps. Despite the enormous human cost, the Chinese were no safer. When the first emperor suddenly died in 210 BC, his subjects decided that they'd had enough of the Qin dynasty.
You can imagine the smouldering discontent throughout the empire because of all the works that were going on, all the people sent up to build the wall, and consequently there were a whole series of uprisings, some led by nobles, some led by peasants, and they all converged upon the capital, killed the second Qin emperor, and that was the end of that.
General Meng Qian became another casualty. He took his own life, stating that he deserved to die. His wall had been a crime against nature. The Qin dynasty lasted less than 20 years, but its engineering legacy has endured for over 2,000. Qin's wall was not abandoned. An even more ambitious dynasty would extend the wall to the very edge of the world and change it into a weapon of empire. The Gobi Desert in western China was one of the toughest places imaginable for mankind's biggest construction project. Even with modern technology, building the Great Wall in this unforgiving climate would be a challenge. 2,000 years ago, it would have seemed impossible. But China's destiny was at stake. In ancient times, bands of fierce warriors rode across these deserts to plunder northern China. Their name was feared throughout Europe and Asia. The Huns. When they reached the fabled Great Wall, they found it almost undefended. So they simply went around it. At this time, China was ruled by a new dynasty, the Han. The Han emperors were still too insecure to take on the nemesis from the north, especially in remote, harsh areas like the Gobi Desert. So they tried diplomacy.
They used a combination of marriage alliances, tribute and trade relationships, and other soft measures to ameliorate the threat, and simply bribing and buying them off.
The Han managed to buy time to increase their strength. In 140 BC, China's moment arrived. A new emperor, Han Wudi, was on the throne. He intended to fight the Huns and win.
He embraced martial culture, developed cavalry commanders who were comfortable in fighting nomadic style and could carry the campaign to the steppe.
As he prepared to attack the Huns, Han Wudi also built up his defenses. He ordered his engineers to rebuild the first emperor's wall, again compacting the earth into a solid mass. But the Gobi Desert needed an entirely different approach. Some areas had no soil, only sand and gravel. It was impossible to pound such material into a solid wall. It would just crumble under pressure. And 2,000 years ago, hauling in tons of soil from the distant eastern regions of the empire was not an option. Han Wudi's engineers had to find another solution. Their answer was incredibly simple. Where they couldn't build up, they dug down, excavating kilometer after kilometer of ditches and moats to halt the Huns' advance. But to defend the border, the Chinese had to be able to locate the enemy. They needed an early warning system, a chain of signal towers across the Gobi. But how could they construct 10-meter towers from crumbling sand and gravel? They were able to develop something much stronger. Han Wudi's engineers found that if they reinforced their sand and gravel towers with layers of reeds, they'd hold together. The same technique is still used today, but instead of reeds, engineers reinforce concrete buildings with metal rods called rebar. Humble reeds played another vital role in the Great Wall's early warning system. Sentries used them to light their signal fires when the Hun raiders approached. Bundles of reeds stacked around the old watchtowers have even survived to the present day, fossilized by desert winds. On the Great Wall's towers, the smoke signals transmitted information much faster than a messenger on horseback. The tallest and straightest smoke columns were produced by burning wolf dung. Different colors and amounts of smoke signaled whether the threat was from a small raiding party or a massive invasion force. Over the years, the Han engineers perfected their technique of building with layers of reeds, thrusting their walls deep into the Gobi. Desert winds have sandblasted these once formidable battlements down to a third of their original size. But even after 20 centuries, they're still impressive. By taking the fight to the enemy, Han Wudi forced the Huns back from northern China and changed the path of world history. For the first time, merchant caravans could travel safely along the fabled Silk Route between Asia and the West, all the way to Rome. But the Hun raiders remained a constant threat. The emperor knew he'd need to protect the vital oases along the Silk Road. That meant building a fortress at remote Yumenguan, China's new western gateway. The ancient Chinese engineers would have to erect an invasion-proof stronghold. The only building material available was soft clay, blown south from Mongolia. The challenge pushed their rammed earth building system to the limit. From wind-borne dust they built a fort with walls 5 times higher than a man, strong enough to still be guarding the Yumen Pass after 2,000 years, continuously battling against the heat, desert wind, and the passing of time. Today, all that's left is the central blockhouse. At the time of its creation, the empire's last outpost was state-of-the-art. As its first line of defense, the Chinese developed a clever alarm system, a ditch filled with fine sand just outside the walls. Anyone spying on the fort at night would leave telltale footprints. For the Chinese, Yumenguan was also the last outpost of their civilization. Beyond its walls lay the realms of the nomad warriors. Anyone condemned to exile left its safety with a heavy heart, knowing they were doomed to death or a life of slavery amongst the barbarians. Emperor Han Wudi built almost 1,000 kilometers of wall to protect the Silk Route. His troops pounded the Huns for 30 years, leaving them badly weakened. More than 1,000 years later, a much deadlier enemy would mass its armies before the Great Wall. It was a far different wall from its earthen beginnings. The wall would become a masterpiece of military engineering at back-breaking cost. "2,000 years ago, engineers of China's Han Dynasty achieved the impossible. They extended the Great Wall across one of the harshest deserts on Earth, driving back the Huns. Centuries later, China would face an even bigger threat: the Mongols. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan and his terrifying armies burst out of Central Asia, carving out an empire that stretched all the way to Europe. The Mongols overran China and ruled it for 100 years, until a new dynasty, the Ming, pushed them back across the border. The year was 1368, and the Ming wanted to make sure China never fell prey to the Mongols again.
So they set about building the Ming Dynasty Great Wall, which turned out to be the most elaborate and extensive and strongest system of border defenses in Chinese history. And the Chinese were prepared to go to any lengths, any amount of labor, money, time, to make sure their civilization would not be disturbed again.
But like earlier dynasties, the Ming emperors didn't have enough troops to crush the barbarian hordes. They could only try to keep the Mongols out, and that was a daunting prospect. The new imperial capital of Beijing seemed well protected by a range of mountains between the city and the northern steppes. But a series of passes sliced through these mountains. And for the Mongol horsemen, these were natural roadways leading to the heart of the Ming capital. To protect their city and their empire, the Ming would have to fortify every one of those passes. Unlike earlier dynasties, they didn't leave such an important task to enslaved peasants. Instead, they called on their best engineers and soldiers. Their leader was the brilliant general Qi Jiguang.
The outstanding character of the Ming Dynasty was Qi Jiguang, the commander of this military region just north of the ancient capital of Beijing. And he was a man that spent a long time out here in the field. And he saw that a lot of effort was going into Great Wall construction, but he felt it didn't necessarily guarantee a good military performance. So he advocated greater manning levels on the wall, and that needed accommodation. So The towers with enclosed space, rooms, were his design. And also the wall made almost entirely of bricks, again, is his design, because by using bricks, the builders could incorporate all those small design features that would make the defense more efficient. For sure, during the Ming Dynasty, Qi Ji Guang was Mr. Great Wall.
Qi Ji Guang's toughest defensive challenge would lie at Gubeikou. 500 years ago, Gubeikou was the weakest point in Beijing's defenses, a pass that offered invaders a straight route into the heart of the capital. It's an easy invasion route for men on horseback and a defender's worst nightmare. So Qi Ji Guang set out to transform this offensive easy street into a defensive killing zone. First, he had a chain of beacon towers built upon the mountain peaks north of the wall. Then, his engineers extended the Great Wall right across the river valley to halt any cavalry charge. Massive gates let the water pass through, but kept out invaders. Anyone who did try to penetrate the defenses would be trapped in the valleys to the side, where the defenders could slaughter them.
It's variously estimated that walls multiply the effectiveness of a single soldier by anywhere from 5 to 13 times. And if properly defended as part of a system, they are very effective.
The military principle behind China's defense system was ages old. Hold the high ground. That meant constructing the biggest walls in places where building anything was a huge challenge. Mountain ridges like Simatai, knife-edge cliffs near Gubeikou, pathways barely wide enough to walk on were next to impossible to build on. But build it they did, and they left no record of how.
Ming Dynasty brick like this is about 13 kilograms, 25, 27 pounds. An enormous effort was required to get the material up to its point of use. And I've never actually tried to carry one of these up there. I guess it's the only way to find out how difficult or easy it was. Let's go. There are no logistical records detailing the basics of wall building, how the material was moved, whether they used animals, whether they used levers. And the only explanation seems to be that at the time they thought in future no one is going to be remotely interested in how something as mundane as a border wall was constructed. Oh, finally, one brick, more than 5 minutes. Whew. The amazing thing for me is that we don't know how many bricks this Ming Dynasty wall contains, but everyone has been carried up here. Everyone has the fingerprints and the sweat of a builder. It's the most labor-intensive construction project in human history. Time for another brick, I think.
But the mountain passes weren't the only vulnerable spot in China's defenses. On the coast east of Beijing, there's a flat strip of land more than 9 kilometers wide. Ideal country for warriors on horseback. It was another invasion highway and another major problem for General Qi Ji Guang. Here, his defenses would have to start below the waterline, or invaders would simply go around them. His solution was to extend the Great Wall more than 18 meters into the sea at Shanhaiguan. The massive edifice sits on a natural reef and huge stone slabs. Like other key places along Qi Ji Guang's new wall, Shanhaiguan was part of an interlocking system. The Great Wall's eastern end was a complex of 5 forts. A series of walls, gates, and fortifications created an impenetrable barrier across the entrance to China, called the First Pass Under Heaven. The Ming engineers used standard-sized bricks joined with mortar, though the mortar's color gave rise to an especially grim legend.
It was long believed that the mortar between the bricks on the Ming Dynasty wall was made of human bones. That gave it its white colour. In fact, the whiteness comes from the burnt lime from limestone. But it actually contains another rather unusual ingredient, but definitely not human bones.
To the Chinese, the secret ingredient was hardly unusual. The emperor's engineers found that the high starch content of rice helped the mortar bond firmly to the bricks. Centuries later, the strength of this unlikely mix still shows. In places where wind and rain have worn away the wall, the mortar has outlasted the bricks. The sturdy Ming walls helped keep towns like Shanhaiguan safe for generations. But General Qi Jiguang knew better than to rely on mere bricks and mortar for protection. Just as important were the men who guarded the walls and the weapons they carried. His combination of strong fortifications, solidly trained soldiers, and powerful weapons would always give well-placed defenders the edge.
The Chinese also had repeating and multiple bolt crossbows so that they could fire several shots in a minute from the repeating bolt. They also had larger versions capable of ranges of 1,000 yards or more, which were known to take down 6 men and their horses at once.
Young Fuxi is a bowmaker. The trade has been in his family for generations. He still makes crossbows just like those that defended the Great Wall against the Mongols. Nomads out on the steppes couldn't make the complicated trigger mechanisms, so the Chinese had a head start in the arms race. The crossbow was the AK-47 of its day, lethal at short range and able to be reloaded quickly. The semi-automatic version could fire 10 shots in 20 seconds.
A typical defense of a wall or a city would require 2 or 3 million arrows at one time, so you can imagine the capacity that was required. The nomads were always at a disadvantage in terms of weapons. They primarily relied on bows and fairly light crossbows. China had a whole range of weapons, and once gunpowder was invented, they had arsenals to produce explosives.
With the advantage of height and a clear line of sight, the Chinese archers rarely missed. General Qi Jiguang had planned for every contingency. His men held every bit of high ground. He'd interlinked his defenses, so troops in one tower could defend their comrades in another. And if attackers made it onto the wall, the defenders could fight them every step of the way. He'd designed this web of defenses to do one thing: channel attackers into a free fire zone where his men could slaughter them.
The wall is built, garrisoned, decades of peace. And then finally, the moment of truth. Attackers arrive. And what a shock lies in store. The Great Wall, a building the likes of which they could never have imagined. This is the killing zone. This is where all hell would be let loose. From the wall itself, the release of arrows and cannon fire. Down in the valleys, more surprises, landmines, ground thunder, iron spikes to lame the horses.
With such impregnable defenses and superior technology, the Ming emperors were confident that their capital would be safe. So they turned their attention to another problem: China's remote western border. There, the Great Wall ended in one of the emptiest deserts in the world, where caravans traveled along the fabled Silk Route. The merchants' taxes helped fill the imperial coffers. but they were easy prey for nomadic bandits. And that meant building new and massive fortifications between the mountains and the desert at a place called Jiayuguan. The Jiayuguan fort would have to be incredibly strong. In this isolated area, a besieged garrison might have to hold out for weeks before help arrived. Somehow, the engineers had to conjure up a vision of empire from crumbling bits of gravel and sand. They came up with an ingenious design. A fort within a fort. Double protection for the defenders and double trouble for invaders. Jiayuguan's layout ensured that anyone entering the fort was always visible and vulnerable. From their perches on the ramparts, sentries could pick off any target at will. Anyone who entered had to navigate a daunting maze of gates and passageways, towers and walls, a Chinese puzzle designed to confuse attackers. The Ming emperors called this place the strongest fortress under heaven. No enemy ever captured it. No one even tried. The cost would have been far too high. Even modern tourists can pick off targets from the battlements. Professional soldiers would have been able to hold off any attacker. But Jiayuguan needed more than a clever design to make it strong. Earlier dynasties had built massive walls in this desert using what nature provided: soil, sand, gravel, and reeds. But by the 15th century, the Ming and their enemies were fighting with much more sophisticated weapons, including some of the world's earliest artillery. So Jiayuguan needed to be made with something much tougher than clay and gravel. Again, the fort builders came up with a brilliantly simple solution. They still relied on local clay and gravel to build their walls, but encased them in multiple layers of densely packed bricks, baked hard in the desert sun. And they made sure to build in arrow slits to discourage tampering. Jiayuguan's thick skin transformed it into an armored fortress and created another Great Wall legend, the story of the last brick.
It's said that the architect in charge of the project calculated precisely how many bricks he needed. But he was also warned by the administrators. If there were any mistakes, of course, there would be heads rolling. Well, what happened? The fortress was completed, and there was one brick left over, and they put it on a ledge above one of the archways. And the architect was asked, "Hey, what's this? The last brick of the Great Wall, it wasn't required." The explanation he gave was the brick had in fact been placed there by a supernatural being. And when people heard this, no one dared to remove it because they thought the fortress would be conquered, and the brick is still there to this day.
Jiayuguan was an architectural triumph, but it still stood alone on the western border, far from any other garrisons. Unless its commander could signal for help, attackers might still overwhelm it and threaten all of western China. So the Chinese army harnessed the desert winds. Ming military planners perfected an imperial smoke signaling system. Jiayuguan's commander could send a message to Beijing almost 2,000 kilometers away in just one day. Finally, safe behind their massive walls, the Ming emperors ruled China for almost 300 years. By the early 1600s, the Great Wall was stronger than ever. But the dynasty that had invested so much in it was about to crumble. The Ming Empire was in turmoil, and its walls would not protect it from trouble within. By the early 17th century, the Great Wall of China had become one of the world's most formidable defense systems. The Ming emperors had spent 3 centuries reinforcing their northern frontier, beating back the Mongols. They lined earthen walls with brick to withstand cannonballs and catapults, and developed superior weapons technology. The Great Wall should have kept the Ming in power forever. But their fortifications were only as strong as the loyalty of the people within them.
One of the main problems of walls is that they are often overcome because of subversion. Nomadic people offered great incentives to anyone who would defect, and in fact promised to spare the lives of people who would surrender.
Shanhaiguan on the Yellow Sea. This wide coastal plain had always been an easy road to riches for marauding horsemen. But the Chinese had stopped them by building an impenetrable barrier. But the Ming dynasty was in trouble. The peasants, taxed to the limit to pay for the Great Wall, had risen up in revolt. And a northern tribe called the Manchu had launched an invasion along the coastal strip. When the Manchu reached Shanhaiguan, its massive defenses halted their advance. Inside, the Chinese watched and waited. Then the garrison commander made a decision that changed the course of Chinese history. He threw open the gates and joined forces with the Manchu to crush the peasant uprising. The world's most sophisticated fortifications were abandoned. In time, they were almost forgotten, and the brutal history of the wall would become entwined with legend. But the Chinese people know that many of the wall's darkest stories are painfully true. Countless numbers of their ancestors paid for the Great Wall with their sweat and blood. Now they've come to see the Great Wall as a symbol of nationhood, and they're working hard to preserve it. Where the wall crosses vital road and rail links, that's often impossible. And it will take many years to repair even the most accessible sections. Machines can perform some of the once back-breaking tasks, but the sheer scale of the project is staggering.
Shanhaiguan has 4 gates. The only one in good condition is the East Gate, the first pass under heaven. We are currently restoring the West Gate. It will take a team of 50 about 7 months to complete. Repairs in just our conservation area, only 1.5 square kilometers, will cost $250 million.
The walls made of tamped earth will take even longer to fix because there are no shortcuts. The same method, thousands of years old, is the only way to rebuild.
There's no way you can use a machine to build this type of wall. The soil is dry. It can't be piled up. So the method we use is the ancient one that's been passed down to us. Of course, the material isn't expensive. It's just dirt. But labor costs are high because all the earth has to be carried up on the backs of people.
Scientists plan to map the entire wall system right across China. But in many places it can be difficult to find the wall at all. So they're using satellites, an aircraft with remote sensing to reveal sections of the wall that have vanished over the centuries. At a laboratory in Beijing, experts are rebuilding Shanhaiguan digitally. Someday it should be possible to travel the entire length of the Great Wall in cyberspace. The defensive walls that still stretch across northern China are on a scale that dwarfs every other construction on Earth. They cut through all kinds of terrain, beneath the sea, over jagged mountain ranges, across unforgiving deserts. Over the centuries, the wall builders faced endless challenges and found ingenious ways to overcome them.
The Great Wall is a remarkable edifice and a testament to human achievement and to organization, the ability to draw men together, whether willingly or not, and far exceeds any such accomplishment in the West, including the Egyptian ability to create the Great Pyramids.
It was essential to make the wall stronger because this was not a conflict that lasted 10 years or 100 years. It was a protracted and violent cultural conflict.
Over 2 millennia of combating their enemies, the Chinese perfected the art of war and the science of defense. They developed technology that is still used in construction today. But China's peasants paid a terrible price, experiencing suffering on an epic scale. More than military might or engineering genius, the Great Wall symbolizes China's determination to survive at any cost.